Hey everybody, welcome back to my channel. My name is Zara and today I'm going to recommend you some horror books that you should check out before the end of this year. We are now in like spooky horror season. I also feel like when winter comes around, I don't know, the mood kind of wants more darker, spookier books. Maybe that's just me. But I've got 5 recommendations that you should check out as we go into this winter season. The first book that I'm going to recommend is a book that I might have my review up by now, so I will keep this brief, and that is The Reformatory by Tananarive Due. This is a very heavy book, so if you're not okay with reading violence, sexual assault, torture, almost like torture, extreme violence, then definitely stay away from this one. If you're interested in like spirits, then I think this is a book that you would appreciate a lot. This book is set during a very dark period of history, which is Jim Crow, Florida. So that already kind of sets the scene. But we are essentially following this boy who gets sent to this school after something happens with a white boy. That isn't even his fault. He gets sent away as punishment and he gets sent to this school where there are spirits, haints, basically roaming it. And it's very, I wouldn't say it's creepy, but there are some very graphic, horrifically violent scenes that really just go to show you the horror of what Black people, African Americans had to go through during this period of history. I've said this before, not even treated like second-class citizens, they were treated like third-class citizens. They were treated so inhumanely that many people didn't even view them as human beings. Like, they viewed them as something inhuman. Like, I still can't quite fathom this, like that this happened, and it didn't even happen that long ago, and when we look at it in the context of broader human history. So it's just a very dark, very unforgiving, very horrifying book that also has this kind of spirits element to it that I didn't know if I would like, because I don't read a ton of horror. But I actually really enjoyed it, and I really liked the kind of manifestation of these spirits and what it meant for the characters and the broader world as well. So definitely check this one out if you're okay with like violence, and specifically violence against children and very graphic scenes. But it's an amazing book, and I strongly recommend anyone to read it if they can. The next one is one that I don't feel like you can have any horror list without Stephen King. So I did pick a Stephen King book, and that is The Green Mile. The Green Mile picks up on certain themes similar to The Reformatory, but obviously slightly different. There is definitely some exploration around race, but this one to me was kind of, it wasn't creepy or anything, but there was just this very unsettling feel to it. And I think if you're a beginner to Stephen King, you haven't read a ton of his stuff, like I think this is a good place to start. It's not my favorite Stephen King, but I like the atmosphere that he created. Also like how addictive it was to read. Like I got through this book pretty quickly, and I think it's just because of the style that King uses in this book. So if you want something that's maybe not as intense as The Reformatory, but still covers really interesting stuff around like the justice system, race, then I think this is one that you should definitely consider picking up. The next book is a Japanese translated fiction, and this book is amazing. I still think about it because it's probably one of the darkest books that I've read, maybe even on par with The Reformatory, which I would go as far as to say is one of the darkest books I've ever read as well. And that is Out by Natsuo Kirino. This is a book following a bunch of women in Japan, kind of like in the suburbs of Japan, as they go through their kind of very domestic lives. They're all struggling in their own ways, and one of our characters basically kind of ends up in this kind of cat and mouse kind of chase, and it's like very much a thriller, but there are some very, very graphic scenes, very chilling to read. Like there were multiple times where I had goosebumps. Like I said, I don't read a ton of horror, but this is the type of horror that I like. Like it's just about normal people living normal lives, but they're struggling and they're trying to figure out how they can best move forward for not only for themselves, but for their families. And I think this is a book that just shows like how anyone has the capacity to do evil things, to do bad things, because it's not always the case that somebody does something horrifying because they have like a vendetta against someone, or because they feel wronged. It's sometimes also because people feel desperate and they don't feel like they have any other way out. And I think it just rationalizes that in a way that could be very understandable to a lot of people. It's brutal though. I would also give a trigger warning for this one. There's 2 scenes that I remember, still to this day imprinted on my brain, like very dark, but so well written. The next one I'm going to recommend to you is a fantasy horror book, and I have talked about this book before on my channel because it just deserves it. Nobody talks about it, and I think it's partially because it's not that well known, and it is a self-published fantasy book as well, and that is The Mermaid's Tale by D.G. Valdron. I did do a full dedicated review on this, so definitely go check it out if you're interested in learning more, but this is just such an amazing book. It's so dark. Like, again, there's one scene in this book that I remember still so vividly. It's basically about our main character who is tasked with figuring out this case. Like, somebody who's been killed, they're tasked with finding out what happened. And there's lots of different fantasy races. There's our main character is very much oppressed because of the fantasy race that they are, and they feel very separate from society because of that. There's a lot of exploration around like finding your place in a world that like just doesn't want you there. And again, I think that's a theme that actually runs through the majority, if not all of these books to some extent. I don't know how to talk about it. Like, it's just such a well-written book. Like, there's this tension because we don't know who's killed who or why, and we're trying to figure it out alongside our main character. But then our main character is going through their own struggles as they're trying to figure out what is happening. It's just horrifying, like the stuff that comes up in this book. And even though there's no like jump scares or anything like that, it's just the sheer like hatred that these beings have for each other that is so horrifying. And even though this is a fantasy world, I think there's a lot of parallels that we can pull to our own world, vilifying certain groups of people for like no real reason, right? And it's just so good. More people really need to read this book. Like, if you like dark fantasy, grim dark fantasy, horror, if you like things that have like a bit of an edge to them, then I think you definitely need to pick this book. It's also a standalone, so you can read it pretty quickly. But like I said, it is heavy, but it's just so well done. Like, it's not like your typical horror book or your horror fantasy book. It's just very unapologetic about what it's trying to set out to do. And then the last one that I have is almost like a historical fiction novella. I say almost historical fiction because it basically is historical fiction. We're basically following this like commander as he goes to this village, and in this village there's a lot of like darkness within it, and they're trying to figure out like where is this coming from and trying to ultimately defeat it. I listened to this on audiobook and it genuinely terrified me. Genuinely. Like, Christian is able to create a very, very like dark atmosphere. Like, you can feel that when they go into this town, something isn't right. It feels very oppressive. It feels very like you shouldn't be there, because no human should want to be there or should be there, whether it's by their choice or not. It's a very quick listen. Like, I think it's only about like 2 hours, and yet Giles Christian is able to create this incredible atmosphere. And it's very violent as well. All of these, to some extent, are very violent and very graphic. But this one in particular, I think I remember kind of having to pause it at one point because I was like, damn, that imagery is just a lot. Yeah, like, it's a lot. So if you want something very short, something that you can get through in like literally an hour or two, definitely pick up Hellmouth. I've not read much historical fiction in general, but I like the fact that it was like historical fiction combined with horror. Like, really, really well done. Very like, had me very much like super like tapped in. Like, I wasn't distracted at all when I was listening to this book, like I often get when I'm listening to audiobooks, because it was just so well done. So there we have it. Those are 5 horror books that I would recommend. Let me know down below if you have any recommendations for me or for others. I like horror generally. There's exceptions to this, like The Reformatory. But I generally like horror where it's like just real people living lives and like horrifying things are happening. And that's, you get a lot of that in The Reformatory too. It's like, it's not that like the spirits are evil, it's that humans are evil and they are causing the horrors. Like, if you have any recommendations around like that, please let me know down below. Please don't recommend me any Stephen King books though, because I have plenty of Stephen King already that I need to get through. Other authors would be great. And I'd also like more diverse authors if anybody has some recommendations there. So there we have it, folks. If you like this video, please do give it a thumbs up, and I will see you in my next one. Thanks for watching. Stay safe, take care, and I'll see you very soon. Bye.